Welcome back, warrior. We are reading, let's see, 2 Samuel chapter 5, but we're going to do kind of a little recap through the chapters that we did not read out loud, but we read to ourselves. So a lot of stuff is happening. So Israel and the Philistines gather for war. The Philistine princes send David away. And then we have the Amalekites spoil Ziklag and the borders of Judah. David smites Amalek and regains and divides the spoil. David's two wives are taken captive. Ahinoam, remember that, the Jezreelitess, and Abigail, the wife of the ex-wife of, I guess not ex-wife, the widow of Nabal, the Carmelite. And then, what else is happening? But then he rescues his wife, or his wives, and so that's good news. Then we have the Philistines defeat Israel, and this is a really sad time because Saul and his 3 sons are slain, and their bodies are retrieved by the Gileadites and burned. Oh, that's so sad. And David finds out and is super sad because now we're entering second book of Samuel, also known as the second book of the Kings. And David learns of the death of Saul and Jonathan. Remember, Jonathan and Saul were besties. So he slays the Amalekite who claims to have killed Saul. And David laments the passing of Saul and Jonathan with a song, which is super nice. Then David is anointed king over the house of Judah. Ishbosheth becomes the king of Israel. David's followers defeat Abner and the men of Israel. And then, what's going on here? Then the houses of David and Saul engage in a long war. David grows stronger. Abner joins David, but is slain by Joab. David mourns for Abner. And then David has sons, and his firstborn was Amnon, and of Ahinoam, the Jezreelitess, and his second son, Chileab of Abigail, the wife of Nabal, the widow of Nabal, the Carmelite. It's interesting that they continue to call her the wife of him because he passed away. Anyway, and the third, Absalom. Okay, you remember the movie? What is that movie? Anyway, son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. So he has now 3 wives. Or no, just kidding. 4 wives. The fourth son is Adonijah, the son of Haggith. And the fifth, okay, he has 5 wives. Okay, the fifth, Shephatiah, the son of Abidal. I'm not going to lie, having 5 kids, maybe around the same age, would be like having quintuplets, which sounds crazy. Okay, I'm lying. There's 6 sons. Ephraim by Eglah, David's wife. These were born to David in Hebron. Okay, so that's just in Hebron. Who knows how many more, right? So anyway, so 6 kids to David through 6 different wives, and just sounds like 6 tuplets. 6, I don't know what that's called, but anyway, so now he has 6 different kids. Okay, and 2 of Saul's captains slay Ishbosheth. They take his head to David, who has them slain for killing a righteous person. And then we are now at 2 Samuel chapter 5. All Israel anoints David king. He takes Jerusalem and is blessed of the Lord. He conquers the Philistines. Okay, so lots of things happened. So here we go. Then came all the tribes of Israel to David unto Hebron, and spake, saying, Behold, we are thy bone and thy flesh. Also in time past, when Saul was king over us, that was he that led us out and brought us in Israel. And the Lord said unto thee, Thou shalt feed my people Israel, and thou shalt be a captain over Israel. So all the elders of Israel came to the king of Hebron, and King David made a league with them in Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. So David becomes king. We can see that after Saul's death, Judah had anointed David as the king, but the other tribes had made Saul's son their king. Now in verse 1, it says, all the tribes of Israel came to David and anointed him king over all Israel. So we can simply say that David became king of Israel here, but the truth is that it was very messy with battles, conspiracy, and passionate opinions. For a time, Israel had been divided, but now they were united under King David. So that's cool. So in Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months. And in Jerusalem, he reigned 33 years over all Israel and Judah. And the king and his men went to Jerusalem unto the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, which spake unto David, saying, Except thou take away the blind and the lame, thou shalt not come in hither, thinking David cannot come in hither. Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion. The same is the city of David. And David said on that day, Whosoever getteth up to the gutter and smiteth the Jebusites, and the lame and the blind that are hated of David's soul, he shall be chief and captain. Wherefore they said, The blind and the lame shall not come into the house. So David dwelt in the fort and called it the city of David. And David built round about from Milo and inward. And David went on and grew great, and the Lord God of hosts was with him. And Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David, and cedar trees and carpenters and masons, and they built David an house. Ooh, nice. So 400 years earlier, the Lord had told the Israelites to conquer the whole land of Israel, but that never completely happened. Canaanites still lived throughout the land. So this is commentary, sorry. And we left off on verse 11. So we'll pick up at verse 12. So when David became king, Jerusalem was occupied by the Jebusites. The Jebusites were a Canaanite tribe that had descended from Noah's grandson Canaan. The Jebusites were wicked people that participated in terrible practices. They had been in many battles with the Israelites and had been defeated. However, they continued to live in and around Jerusalem. They called the city of Jerusalem Jebus. When David became king, he set his sights on Jerusalem and conquered it. In verse 6, it says that the Jebusites told David, Except thou take away the blind and the lame, thou shalt not come in hither. Jerusalem was a city set on a hill and was a stronghold, because it was difficult for armies to attack. The Jebusites believed that their city was so strong that even the blind and the lame could defend it, and they used this fact to mock the Israelite army. However, David's armies took Jerusalem, and it then became known as the city of David. Not to be confused with Bethlehem, which is also called the city of David because it was David's birthplace. Jerusalem then became the capital city, and from there, David reigned and grew great. A neighboring king honored David by sending him materials to build a palace in Jerusalem. Oh, nice. The palace that King David built remains somewhat of a mystery. In 2005, an archaeologist found that she believes to have been the palace of King David. Many archaeologists doubt that the findings were actually this palace. You can watch a video to see for yourself and learn some other interesting things about David and this palace spoken of in verse 11. Okay, so I don't think you're going to be able to see this, but we're going to try to show you anyway. Maybe you can scan the QR code I don't know. I would probably do a search for King David's uh, possible, right? Okay, so this is what it says. And this is, let's see if we can get that focused right there. See if you can scan that. I don't know. Okay. Okay, so now we're on verse 12. And David perceived that the Lord had established him king over Israel, and that he had exalted his kingdom for his people Israel's sake. And David took him more concubines and wives out of Jerusalem after he was come from Hebron. And there were yet sons and daughters born to David. Okay, so more wives and more concubines. Like, I can't even, but like, it was a different time then. So I'm trying to give a little bit of grace for that. But also, just because of the grace that I'm giving doesn't mean that these women probably did not experience some betrayal trauma. Like, for sure, they would have, regardless of the fact that they were back in the day. Satan has been torturing us women against each other, or pitting us against each other and torturing us about our bodies and our body image. And so I am sure 100% that, which is still speculation, but I'm 100% sure that these women who were David's wives or concubines were experiencing this betrayal trauma, and were experiencing the torture that Satan has like the torture that Satan gives us, to me, is called betrayal trauma. And they probably experienced this, and instead of comparing themselves on social media like we do, right, because now everybody has one wife anyway, mostly. I'm sure there's people out there who are still trying this David method, but that they have one wife. But now you can just switch and swipe and do all these things and see all kinds of women online and doing all kinds of evil things and bad and like just gross, just through pornography and everything. And so it's like, you don't have to marry the women anymore, I guess, to have access to them, right? But David back then, and I'm not saying that's like he was an evil person that way, but the women could compare themselves to each other, being as they were all wives and concubines, and it was just like this big, like, it just seems like so many, and so they had people to compare each other to, and Satan definitely used their relationship of being King David's wives and concubines as this way to torture each other, and I could just imagine, like, if we just read a story about one of them, would be crazy to be like, oh, and I wish I could see the journals, of these women and what they experienced in their own words, and how it must have been really tough for them also. But back in the day, being wanted by a king meant something, and being protected and cared for and stuff. So it's not like these women did not want this. And I'm sure that some of them considered, like, hey, he already has a bunch of wives. I don't know if I want to be there. But hey, maybe you do, maybe you do. And so anyway, that's like kind of what I wanted to get out there. Because I'm like, how did these women survive each other? I don't even know. And I'm surprised none of them talk about, and so-and-so tried to kill so-and-so. All the men try to kill each other. But I wonder if there's any women who tried to kill each other. But I don't know. I guess the relationship between women is also something that if we can bypass our own pride and we can ignore Satan's torture, then the relationship between women can really flourish and become something new and awesome, right? Because sisters really do get it, Anyways, verse 14. Wait, did I read 13? And David took him more concubines and wives out of Jerusalem after he was come from Hebron, and there were yet sons and daughters born to David. So hopefully these women all could have children, and that could, help them focus on their relationship with their own children, instead of focusing on the torture that Satan is providing them. So verse 14, and these be the names of those that were born unto him in Jerusalem: Shemua and Shobab and Nathan and Solomon. Ibnar also and Elishua and Nepheg and Japhia and Elishama and Eliada and Eliphalet. Okay, well, are they all from the same family? Because we do that too. All of our kids' names start with F. All of his kids' names start with E from that one. Who knows? But when Philistines heard that they had anointed David king over Israel, all the Philistines came up to seek David, and David heard of it and went down to the hold. The Philistines also came and spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim. And David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I go up to the Philistines? Wilt thou deliver them into mine hand? And the Lord said unto David, go up, for I will doubtless deliver the Philistines into thine hand. And David came to Baal Perazim, and David smote them there, and said, the Lord hath broken forth upon mine enemies before me as the breach of waters. Therefore he called the name of the place Baal Perazim. I don't know. And there they left their images, and David and his men burned them. And the Philistines came up yet again and spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim. And when David inquired of the Lord, he said, thou shalt not go up, but fetch a compass behind them, and come upon them over against the mulberry trees. And let it be, when thou hearest the sound of a going in the tops of the mulberry trees, that then thou shalt bestir thyself, for then shall the Lord go out before thee to smite the hosts of the Philistines. And David did so, as the Lord had commanded him, and smote the Philistines from Geb until thou come to Gazer. Okay, so multiple times. Wait, hold on. So David's large family. First, we're going to cover that a little bit longer. As gifts, fame, success, and prosperity came to David, he was able to still see that the Lord had established him king over Israel, and that he had exalted his kingdom for his people's Israel's sake. David knew that his role as king was stewardship, and God was exalting his kingdom. David was not becoming great. Israel was becoming great. When David moved from Hebron to Jerusalem, he took him more concubines and wives. Okay. When David moved from Hebron to Jerusalem, he took him more concubines and wives, and had more children born to him. The Lord spoke of David in Doctrine and Covenants 132. He spoke of the strict conditions surrounding those who participate in plural marriage. Speaking of David, the Lord explained, David's wives and concubines were given unto him of me by the hand of Nathan, my servant, and others of the prophets who had the keys of this power. And in none of these things did he sin against me, save in the case of Uriah and his wife. Okay, Doctrine and Covenants 132:39. So yeah, I am definitely not saying that he is sinning at all. But what I'm saying is that the torture that Satan will provide these women because of their relationship now in this marriage with King David is something that I am glad I don't have to deal with, honestly. But it's another level. Like, they would have had to have, I'm sure that some of the wives were like totally chill and like, what else, you know? But then there must have been at least one who struggled and who had body image problems and who had issues whenever, who had issues whenever they'd or torture whenever they'd see another woman. And the only reason I speak this way is because I experience it and everyone else experiences this comparison. And I'm not saying that because we're weak or because they're weak, or not trying to say all that. But because the torture that Satan gives us is the same throughout time. And he would have tortured them with jealousy, with, if they didn't take care of their spiritual relationship with Christ to receive that confidence from him, they would have struggled with those things. And because the torture exists throughout time, Satan has data on us women. And if the torture that he gave us now didn't work, he wouldn't try it. Right? And so he has tried this same torture on women back in the day when David was king with his wives and concubines, and now has translated all of that torture to us, because I still feel insecure sometimes if I'm not doing my spiritual self-care, if I'm not doing my physical self-care, if I'm not doing my mental self-care, if I'm not doing all these things to strengthen myself, then Satan's whispers and torture can creep in and provide the insecurity, the jealousy, the comparison, all those things. And so King David was not sinning, but I'm just saying that his wives in this relationship and concubines would have experienced the exact torture we would have experienced, and at least one of them was not up on doing all her things, and would have been really hard to be in that kind of relationship at that time. So anyway, that's all I'm trying to say, because it is crazy. And then of course we will talk about Uriah and his wife after, at some point, but not in this chapter. But could you imagine? King David has so many wives. Why is he, now all the wives could rally together against this Uriah's wife. Oh my heck. Right? I can just see how that would mess up all of this, and why it would mess with all the wives' spiritual, they would experience more betrayal trauma because of it. But we're going to cover that when we get there. So then we see David dealing with a Philistine invasion by going to the Lord to seek guidance and receiving an answer. Then when Israel conquered the Philistines, they destroyed their idols. This was the kind of king Israel needed. Yes, the kind that will destroy idols. Okay, multiple times in Samuel 1, we learn that David would go out and behave wisely. Here we see a specific example of a time that David exercised wisdom. David had just won a battle against the Philistines, and now the Philistines again came just as they had before. Notice how similar verse 18 and 22 are. The Philistines came to the same exact valley to camp. David could have thought, I have already done this, and think that because the Lord was with him before, the Lord would be with him again. But David does not assume anything and turn to the Lord just as he did before, which was very wise, because the Lord gave him a different answer. The Lord told David not to circle their enemy, but instead to come over by the mulberry trees. Then they were to listen for a specific sound among those trees. When the wind comes upon them and they hear the sound of going in the tops of the mulberry trees, the sound of going can also be translated as the sound of marching. So this is not a gentle movement of the leaves, but a sound that is very distinct. When they hear that sound, the Israelite army was to move quickly out, and they would know that the Lord had marched out before them. This is wisdom. This is David behaving himself wisely. He humbly turned to the Lord and heeded specific direction. As long as he does that, he will always lead Israel to victory. To the victory, Okay, that is it for chapter 5. A thought starter is, what qualities make David a good king and leader? What qualities would you like to develop within yourself? And I would add, what qualities do you think these women would need so that they would not experience the torture of betrayal trauma? So that they could stay strong against it and not hate all the women, right? That's a good one. Okay. Until 2 Samuel chapter 6. Stay strong, warrior.